After their rough meeting and a failed assassination attempt on the giantess, Arela, the Faringan woman, was walking in a mountain forest, searching for Lyxe. She wondered what kind of business the giantess would have with her, that far out from the glass cities and countless people. The thought was filling her with dread and guilt, but she tried to keep her high spirits. She didn't expect Lyxe to call her, not after everything that's happened in the past. After all, she had joined forces with terrorists who had tried to kill Lyxe. That was no small offense, and it was pretty dangerous out here. There were gigantic creatures everywhere, and Lyxe herself was the biggest creature of all, standing over 200 meters tall. Luckily, Arela lent herself a protective bracelet that emanated a force field around her body and a communication device, just in case Lyxe didn't notice her, which had a higher chance of occurring than she wanted to admit. Even though she was protected, there was an unyielding sense of utter discomfort when walking through this massive forest, alone. It wasn't just the size of it that was daunting, but there was just something inherently chilling in witnessing giant animals, with paws and maws easily overwhelming her puny posture, or insects wiggling around like some sort of very livable, very creepy, chaotic trains. The air was getting a bit more dense the higher up the mountain she got. Lyxe was somewhat precise about their meeting place, but it seems she may have slightly underestimated how long it'll take Arela to arrive there. Passing through the imposing trees and amid the bushes to hide herself from animals, the Faringan woman eventually arrived at, well, not exactly peak of the mountain, but a vast ravine. She couldn't really go any farther, so she sighed and sat down, her legs and feet loosely kicking in the air above the seemingly never-ending abyss. Feeling the cold breeze on her face and thinner air around her, she couldn't help but think about what Lyxe wants from her. She wanted to rest a little and be on her way back if she doesn't arrive soon. Seconds turned to minutes, and resigned started to stand up. Then a booming voice calling, "There you are!" startling her and causing her to tumble a little down before shaking it off and standing up. As she tried to calm down her pounding heart, echoing laughs of the giantess ringed across the mountain range. Arela's shock turned into anger once she realized what has happened and whose voice surprised her. She pouted a little and clenched her fists before closing her eyes and taking a long, deep breath and loosening her hands. What the giantess did wasn't really nice, but it also wasn't too harmful, spare for the damage on her already battered pride. She looked at the axolotl giantess' now fully healed arm and sighed. She didn't have the right to be angry at her, especially not after what happened. Despite coming to terms with what happened and explaining problems between two, Arela still felt bad for being pretty much the main reason Lyxe's injury happened in the first place. The giantess kept laughing for a decent while. Arela's reaction and subsequent silence amused her a little, especially considering the fact she waited for a moment before emerging and surprising the girl she's called over. Once Lyxe has regained her composure, Arela finally took a deep breath and asked, "So, any particular reason you've called me here, of all places? Why couldn't we just do it somewhere closer?" Lyxe smiled and crossed her arms. "I wanted to talk with you. It's that simple, but at home there are quite literally millions of people listening when I speak, whether they want it or not, so I needed a way. I wanted to be alone with you." These words made the little girl shudder a bit, stepping back instinctively. But why is that?" Lyxe sighed. "You hate me. I know that. Besides, you made it pretty clear in the past." She took a brief glance at her healed arm. Arela shook her head and stepped forward. "What? No. I don't. I've changed. Yeah, I may have not liked you in the past, but that's in the past." Lyxe smiled somberly. "Don't worry, I won't be angry at you. I know it's not that easy to change your feelings. I just want to understand you, to see where you're coming from. And maybe for you to understand me as well." Lyxe leaned against the rocks and came really close with her face. That seemingly natural gesture alone made Arela quite nervous. Just the face of the giantess was like a huge building when compared to her little self. But it really didn't seem like Lyxe has any ill intentions, so she did her best to quench the nervousness. I promise to fully submit to you." Arilla started speaking, but Lyxe interrupted her with a warm breath washing over. And you did, please. You even laid down in my way, almost every single day just so I can step on you. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Listen, even if I enjoy to have you and many others stuck to my soul as I walk, I really don't want you to suffer. Okay, so please, let's talk. I want to learn. Maybe I'll have to change my behavior a little so people aren't too uncomfortable or scared when around me, but for that, I'll need your help. Can I count on you? Listening to the giantess, Arilla felt a strange sense of comfort and understanding. She looked emptily to the side before shaking her head and looking up at Lyxe. She felt safe to speak freely, so she sighed and explained, "It's just, I don't like to be tiny, so fragile and easily overpowered by pretty much everything. It often feels hopeless, you know?" Lyxe shrugged a little. "I mean, if we want to be technically precise here, it's not exactly you who is tiny. You are normal size for a human being. It's me who's gigantic. That's quite a difference. Think about it. If you could also be gigantic relative to anyone else, whether it's you who is huge or them who are tiny would purely depend on the perspective." Arilla listened and nodded. "Yeah, you're right. It's just, I don't like to be so small compared to you or your friends." Lyxe scratched the top of her head, trying to understand the Ferengian woman. "So, you just want to be gigantic too, like me? So you wouldn't be so small?" The woman sighed, and it seemed as if her anger finally started to catch up to her. "I know. It's just, I just sometimes wish huge beings like you wouldn't exist." She instantly blushed and covered her mouth, slightly scared she may have had upset the giantess, but Lyxe coiled back and spoke. "Ouch. That hurts. So you just want me dead because I'm big and mighty?" Arilla shook her head. "That's not what I meant. It's just..." But before she could explain her point, Lyxe continued. "Ooh, maybe those rebels had the same feelings and wanted to kill me for that reason? Would make sense why you joined them. So you just feel uncomfortable when a giant being is present because you cannot control the situation at all? Am I right?" She wondered and lifted her hand above Arilla. Looming shadow made her shudder as she looked up and listened to Lyxe. "After all, I could easily crush you to death, effortlessly, and even incredibly painfully if I really wanted to. Does that scare you?" The calm and composed tone of voice that stood in contrast to the act made Arilla sit down instinctively. "Oh, of course it's scary. Especially when you put it that way. It just, it makes me feel so weak, so worthless." She hung her head down. It wasn't often when she let her deepest feelings out, but they were alone here, and out of all people, Arilla felt Lyxe deserves to see that side of her the most. Lyxe placed her hand next to Arilla, very gently quaking the ground. "But you're not worthless," she called out and took a deep breath. "Arilla, the whole reason I'm using the bracelet, why I'm telling you all to be careful and have something to signal me or others at all times when you're out, is because I want to protect you, your people, other people," she explained and took another deep breath. "Hell, I even evacuated a whole planet to save as many as I possibly could. I could have just left you and the others for dead after you and the rebels tried to finish me, but I didn't. You know why? Because I know very well that a single life is worth more than anything else. There is no adequate way to measure or express in words the value of life," the giantess explained, getting a bit irritated. Arilla stood up and screamed out in response. "I know," she calmed down. "I know you did. I know you wanted to help us on Faringa, and for that, I can never possibly repay you. But still, it's such a strange feeling. Compared to you, I'm like an ant at best. It's so humiliating," she explained, shaking her head. The giantess slowly moved her index finger over Arilla, circling it for a brief moment before softly pressing her down and smiling. "I guess that can be humiliating. You're not wrong. But I've noticed that some people really love to be overpowered and overwhelmed. Isn't this strange? The fact that some of you enjoy that and others don't?" She contemplated quite philosophically as she held the tiny girl in place. Arilla could feel the pressure and heat of the index finger on her whole puny body. She could even feel the giantess' rhythmic, pounding heartbeat through the skin. Though she couldn't move much, it didn't exactly feel horrible. She listened to Lixie's words further. And to be entirely honest with you, I really love to overpower you tiny humans. It's quite fun to see you utterly overwhelmed or just scared by my size. That's something I find pretty cute. Arilla tried to understand the giantess's perspective, but it was hard. Lyxe continued, "But you know that I won't hurt you, right?" she asked kindly. Arilla nodded slowly, her face grazing the soft finger. "Yeah, I know, as well as I know and accept that you can do whatever you want with me. As I said, I fully submit myself to you," she explained. Lyxe asked curiously, "Even if you don't like it?" A moment of silence answered, before Arilla finally muttered out one word. "Yes." Massive Finger started to back off, allowing Arilla to stand up and look in confusion as she listened. "You don't have to do that. I really hope we can build a better relationship, Arilla. I don't want to make you even more angry, to have a fake relationship where you utterly hate me but comply out of, I don't know, fear, guilt, or something else." Arilla was surprised by the giantess's words. She couldn't understand. Why do you even care? I'm just one among millions. You could literally talk with endless other people, most of which probably don't even harbor anything against you, she asked in a mix of anger and confusion. Lyxe shook her head. "Your feedback is especially important to me. You have a unique perspective. Besides, I don't think anyone would tell me what you did, even if they were feeling the same. You have changed your mind about me, even if only a little, and—" She sighed a bit sadly. "I don't know. I think I just want to be loved, not hated." Before Arilla could process that information, the giantess gently grabbed her and brought her in front of her towering face. She continued, letting the breath wash over Arilla again and thicken the air around her. "People are usually in awe, amazement, and wonder when they see or are around a giant like me." Arilla crossed her arms and raised her eyebrow. "Or fear." Lyxe smiled and nodded. "Okay, fear too. But I meant people who know me for who I am. They usually like to be around me, no matter if it's my big friend or countless tiny people. Some just enjoy being stuck under my feet, to my hand. Some even enjoy being in my mouth." She opened her maw and showed her huge, sharp teeth, making Arilla gulp a little. Lyxe closed her mouth and asked, "But is there truly nothing you could enjoy, Arilla? Isn't there anything we could work out together?" The tiny girl sat down, looking into the distance, genuinely thinking of even one thing she could enjoy. However, before she could find such a thing, another giantess has approached them. It was Lorraine, a huge black woman that was almost as tall as Lyxe. Arilla looked at her and wondered if she was a Faringan too. Probably not, but she definitely looked like one thanks to her dark skin, akin to Arilla. Unlike the girl, however, Lorraine was massive. She was walking on the mountains, admiring the views and relaxing before she decided to sit down at the ravine. Whether she knew it or not, she let her legs dangle next to Lyxe. It took her a brief moment before she looked down and realized that, speaking a bit surprised, "Hello, you said I should come here, so here I am." Arilla heard that and couldn't help but think, why did Lyxe invite both her and that giantess to this obscure place? Lyxe nodded. "Indeed, I'm glad to see you, and your daughter? Did she come with you?" Lorraine smiled and nodded. "Yeah, she's here. But, how do I put it so it doesn't sound too bad? She's just a bit scared and doesn't really want to see you." She scratched the back of her head and continued, "You know, I don't think she likes you. Do you think it could have something to do with the fact that you tried to kill me the last time we met?" She spoke about such a serious situation in a surprisingly chill fashion. Arilla raised her eyebrow. Another one who doesn't like yo. Wait just a second here. You tried to kill her? But why?" She called out to Lyxe, who answered, turning her gaze on the tiny girl. "You're the one to speak, huh?" She giggled. Arilla blushed and smiled a little. "Oh, it's not about me." Lyxe giggled and sighed. "Right, because, Arilla, Lorraine really likes to crush people like you, painfully slow if you want to know." Lorraine giggled innocently, which struck even more confusion into Arilla's heart. "That's true. I won't deny that. I can even show you, if you'd like." On Lyxe's hand, Arilla gulped and started to instinctively back away, tumbling over and falling on her butt in fear. Lorraine added casually, "Oh, don't worry. I won't dare to crush you. You are a friend of Lyxe, and Let's just say, I don't want her to try to kill me again. One time is more than enough. Lyxe was getting slowly more annoyed by Lorraine's nonchalance and casual manner, so she dropped the hammer of facts. Yeah, you killed like what, over 2 million people when we met? Extreme doesn't even start to cover it. Hell, even Gulsan has never crushed so many, and she could restore them back, but you... As she was speaking with anger in her voice, Lorraine interrupted. Hey, I already told you I didn't know my bracelet wouldn't work then. I did this with conviction. I could reverse it after I'm done. Arella was utterly shocked hearing that. She began shivering, and... Well, Lyxe really wasn't as bad as she thought, at least compared to... some others. Out of a sudden, Tina, Lorraine's daughter, has appeared on her mother's shoulder and screamed furiously at Lyxe. Don't you dare talk to my mom like that. She did all of this for me just so my dreams could come true. I wanted her to be a giantess. Lyxe's face was that of pure surprise, so she calmly inquired, Oh, interesting. So you wished your mom would kill millions of people? The answer was unexpected. Yes, I love my mom. She's amazing and great. I really love her crushing people with her powerful yet beautiful bare feet. As she kept speaking, Tina has gotten a little carried away by her own fantasies. And I'd love to be one of the lucky ones who gets crushed slowly under her soft soles. Lorraine blushed. Okay, honey, calm down. You know I would never harm you. No amount of wishing will change that. For a brief moment, Lyxe and Arella looked at themselves, almost as if having the same thought in their mind. They were speechless, and their faces painted an utmost surprised expression. Is she? Lyxe thought, and Arella finished, For real? However surprising it was, they remembered that Aya and many other people also quite liked the idea of getting crushed, so... It all seemed Tina was just one of them, though the way she worded it was what struck so much surprise into them. After a moment of silence, Lyxe boomed out in laughter, surprising everyone. Ha! So what do you think about that, Arella? Even she wants to be crushed. You two are polar opposites. And the awkward silence continued. The only way it could have gotten worse was if some giant cicadas started cricketing. Since no one else was laughing, Lyxe blushed heavily and cleared her throat. Ekhim. Anyway, what do you think? The villagers have prepared something for us back at home. Something that I hope, I'm sure, you'll all appreciate. So let's visit them, can we? Maybe we can all be friends, despite what happened between us. Lyxe said a bit hopefully. For some reason, Arella has been intrigued and fascinated by the black giantess. Could it be because she looked like a Faringen? Or because she also seemed quite different to Lyxe, as she did to Tina? Sie wollte das Eis brechen, also fasste sie sich ein Herz und sprach, when we go back now, could you giants carry us? I mean, you know. Compared to you, I'm so small and weak. It took me hours to get here, and I would need the same hours to just walk back. Lyxe giggled. Of course I'll carry you home. What kind of questy? Arella interrupted her. Wait. Everyone looked at the tiny Faringen woman. Lyxe, you want everyone to be friends, right? So how about an exchange? I'd like to get carried by. She looked at Lorraine, not wanting to disrespect her. The black giantess nodded. You can call me Lorraine, sweetie. It's all right. Arella continued. Okay, by Lorraine and maybe, just maybe, Lyxe could carry her daughter? I just thought we could all get a bit closer and gain some trust to one another this way. Lyxe smiled and nodded. Look at you. I like the idea. However, it was clear Tina isn't really comfortable at the prospect of being carried by who could have easily been her mother's killer. Lorraine noticed that and nodded to Lyxe and Arella before picking her daughter up from the shoulder, holding her on the hand and calmly speaking. Honey, it'll be okay. I know you don't like her, but look at me. Lyxe isn't mean, to be honest. She was quite right to get mad at me, even if I did it for you and enjoyed it, but that's beside the point. Just give her a chance, okay? One chance is all I'm asking for. She explained to Tina, who took a moment to think about it, and sighed. Okay, maybe it won't be too bad. Upon accepting, Lorraine gently moved her hand forward. Lyxe stretched her hand too, initially with a plan to pick Tina up. Lorraine discreetly shook her head, and Lyxe picked up on that, opening her palm instead and sliding half of it under Lorraine's hand so Tina can hop on her own. After a brief moment, she jumped down and was a bit scared of the monster giantess, but she had to admit that the skin of her palm felt surprisingly nice, like way nicer than she expected. Something else has caught Arila's attention. Lorraine wasn't wearing usual clothes, but rather they looked like specifically prepared for tinies. A white tank top, long pants. The only unusual part of that outfit was an abundance of ropes and railing everywhere around Lorraine's giant body, seemingly so tiny people could easily climb and have fun everywhere on the massive, looming body. Arila smiled, being happy about that, and climbing onto Lorraine's hand. She shyly approached and asked the black giantess, Lorraine? Do you think I could, climb all around your body? I mean, these ropes just look so much fun. And the giantess giggled and nodded. Of course, just be careful to not fall. I'll keep a slow pace so you can have fun. Arila was amazed, not only by the fact she agreed to that, but she had a hard time believing Lorraine could commit such a massacre as described by Lyxe. Well, it wasn't the time to dwell on the sad things. She hung onto the ropes and began climbing down, all while Lorraine was walking behind Lyxe. The black giantess didn't want to be the one dictating the tempo, not with a tiny passenger around, so she let Lyxe take the lead. While these two seem to have kicked their relationship off quite well, things between Lyxe and Tina have been way more awkward. The conversations didn't really hit off. It was a slightly dull exchange of Lyxe asking for how long Tina was having her dream, and Tina inquiring if the giantess really wanted to kill her mom or just threaten her. As the time went by, the two were warming up to each other, having cleared up some misunderstandings and learning more about each other. As they kept walking, Lorraine asked, "Hey, is it okay if I turn a bit here? I'll be close, but see this stretch?" She pointed forward. There are much less trees here, so Arila should be safe, even if she takes a wild swing. I promise I won't stray too far. Arila was happily climbing down the thigh, swinging to leap and catch the rope on the other one, and climbing back up. She was having a lot of fun, and her heart was melting a little at Lorraine's words. Lyxe happily nodded. Sure, we'll go forward with Tina, and in the worst case, we'll just wait for you both, right? She looked at the tiny girl, who happily nodded. The two pairs separated a little, and Lyxe continued. What you said back then, Tina, when you were pretty much screaming at me, what exactly are your fantasies? She was sure to whisper to make sure Lorraine doesn't accidentally overhear it. Tina blushed a little. Sorry about the screaming. Upon reassurance from Lyxe that it's okay, the tiny girl continued. Elle, let's make it clear. I don't exactly want people to suffer. I wish I could be crushed like them, but my mom will never do that. I understand why, but other than seeing her as a giantess, I really wish to be under her feet as she walks. I guess you could call it my biggest wish. Lyxe listened and thought about her words, taking a peek that Lorraine takes a long way around, smiling a bit as she could tell she does it for Arila. She looked back at Tina. I have an idea. I know I am not exactly your mom, but I could step on you if you'd like. How about this? Tina wasn't too sure at first, but then cheered up and nodded happily. Sure, let's try this. Just, maybe so Mom doesn't see? I don't know if she'd be happy about that, she said nervously. Lyxe gently placed Tina on the ground, making sure Lorraine doesn't see this, and stepped on her a bit quickly. There was no time to tease if there was a chance of Lorraine noticing them. Engulfing her tiny self beneath a huge sole, Lyxe felt Tina sticking to the sole, and after a few steps, whispered into the communicator. So, how is it? The tiny girl was placed on the ground before a powerful yet soft foot squished her down. She was utterly overwhelmed by this feeling, and being stepped on repeatedly, pressed into the sole time and time again, sticking to it like a bug was. Much better than she expected. Though the dirt on her back was a bit coarse, squishiness and warmth of the foot was easily overpowering it. While initially afraid and unsure of Lyxe, Tina had to admit that not only her hands felt nice and soft, but her feet weren't half bad either, and being stuck to them, even if a bit sweaty from the heat, was incredible, doesn't even start to cover it. In muffled voice, happily grazing the powerful sole, she replied to the slightly worried giantess. I love it. Thank you. Lyxe giggled, and the two continued on their path happily. On the other route, Arla was having a blast climbing all over Lorraine's body, down the legs and up again, between the thighs, up the butt, over the back and the tank top, like maneuvering around a Titanic moving mountain and finally sitting down on the shoulder, exhausted but happy and full of adrenaline, and thought that, did she just enjoy something around a giant person? Was it supposed to feel that good? Panting, Arla threw her hand back and stretched on the giantess's shoulder, looking at her curiously. So, Pant. Would you mind telling me, Pant, a bit more about yourself? Your family, for example? And Pant, more importantly, how did you even get so big? And, Pant, how does it feel like? She barraged Lorraine with questions, but the giantess gently giggled and nodded. Family is a bit of a touchy subject. I have a lovely daughter, Tina, but I don't want to reminisce the past, okay? How did I get so big is related to that, so maybe on other occasion I'll tell you about it. The last question, though. She stretched a little, careful not to drop Arla. It feels lovely. I feel so powerful, so free, I can do whatever I like and no one can stop me. She looked at Lyxe and scratched the back of her head. Well, no normal people, at least. Though Arla kind of expected these answers, she was curious, but didn't push. For some reason, she was getting along really well with Lorraine. Maybe the familiar skin color, maybe the fact Lorraine wasn't so big in the past, maybe because she had a daughter that was so different to her. Arla blushed a little and shimmered closer, resting against Lorraine's neck. Oh, and thanks for letting me climb all over you. That sounds so strange. It felt surprisingly nice, she admitted, and Lorraine nodded. I'm glad to hear it. If you would ever want to do this again, I'll be happy to let you. The rest of the path for both pairs went in relative silence, but also mutual peace and happiness. After a longer while, it seemed both wanted to take their time to bond and have fun. They finally approached Lyxe's home. The giantess looked that Lorraine is still coming, so she swiftly peeled Tina off her sole and cleaned her from the dirt before winking and bringing a finger to her mouth. Tina giggled and repeated the gesture. It was their secret, for now at least. Within the garden, people gathered at the border, and Lyxe kindly introduces them to another giantess. Hello, everyone. Meet Lorraine. They began waving. Lorraine waved back before she felt Lyxe's gaze on her, and her words directed to her. As giants here, we're helping the farmers with the berries and other fruits. But why am I explaining? Come, you'll try for yourself. I think you'll like it, she said, and began guiding Lorraine through the garden. After a brief moment, they sat down somewhere, and Lyxe went first, putting her feet in glass boxes and placing Tina on the ground. Lorraine repeated the gesture, gently taking Arla and placing her next to Tina before sliding her feet in. Lyxe giggled. And now? Squishing the berries before plopping her feet upright. Lorraine was interested, so she did the same, and was pretty surprised that people aren't just collecting the remains, but some are even licking her soul to make sure nothing goes to waste. It did feel nice, but Lorraine sure didn't expect this to happen. By pure happenstance, Arla and Tina were placed in a box where Lorraine's feet were squishing the berries, so they were pretty close to the imposing, towering dark soul. They kept observing the tiny farmers and people at work. Tina's eyes were widely open, and she could only mutter out, "Wow!" Arla grabbed her by the shoulder and giggled. Impressed? She nodded, being in absolute awe upon seeing so many people crawling voluntarily under and onto her mother's feet, some of them even licking it clean, without as much as a whim or word from Lorraine. She noticed Lyxe squishing berries on the other side, so she patted Arla on the shoulder. It feels a bit unfair. I'll go help them. A poor excuse, but who was she to stop her anyway? Lorraine noticed that, but just because she refused to fulfill Tina's wishes didn't mean she can't enjoy herself beneath someone else's, as long as she's safe. Tina was running as fast as she could to join the people beneath Lyxe's foot. Running over there and blending herself with the crowds, she crawled under Lyxe's soul again and started to help clean it from the fruit remains. Not only the fruit was pretty tasty, but she enjoyed this so much. It was definitely one of the best moments in her entire life. Arla, wasn't really joining neither Tina nor people under Lorraine's feet. She just sat down nearby and observed, allowing her thoughts to gather and sort out. Hell, she was even ready to admit that Lorraine has surprisingly nice feet. Seeing her overwhelming toes curling and squishing the berries, gently squishing the tiny farmers as well, was not something she'd feel she enjoys, but it was an interesting experience to watch. As she observed, she started to realize that she really feels comfortable around Lorraine, even if she's just as tiny as fragile when compared to her as with Lyxe. The reasons were unknown to her, but it felt nice. Maybe this day, this unusual experience, helped to her understand giants a little and appreciate giants a bit more. Minutes kept passing by, and she watched more as Lorraine's beautiful feet kept moving. While initially reluctant, she sighed and smiled. Even Tina went to help, so she should as well. She decided to join the people and crawled under Lorraine's huge long sole and allowed herself to just enjoy it. Enjoy the moment, the feeling of getting squished with others, the feeling and taste of licking off some fruity juice. At the end of the day, it seemed that both Arilla's plan as well as Lyxe's has worked out wonderfully. The four started to grow closer to one another and trust themselves. Even the most anti-giant, Arilla, began to enjoy herself. Lyxe observed that, and while she hoped for something like this to happen, she smiled, being incredibly happy that Arilla may start to warm up to the giants. Even if not her tiny self warming up Lorraine, especially after hearing what the black giantess was, honestly better outcome than she could have imagined. There was still reason for hope. The end. That was the story A New Perspective, written by Elusive Sparrow. You can find the text version in the description below. We hope you liked the story. If so, please leave us a like and a subscription. And if you want to support us, take a look at our Patreon page. Thank you very much.